Hi there, I'm Nadia. I gave my parents $5 million, everything I had from a tech exit, to rescue our family business. And what did I get in return? They changed the company name, locked me out, then sent a lawyer to tell me I wasn't even family anymore. Worse than the betrayal? They blamed me for walking away, after erasing me from everything I helped build. And now, they want my help again? The kettle clicked off just as the sun dipped behind the Denver skyline. I poured hot water over the tea bag like I'd done 100 times before. No ceremony, no care, just habit. The apartment was quiet, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the wall clock. Then the voicemail started. "Hey, sweetheart, we need your help again. Just something small. Call me, okay?" My mother's voice, as polished and practiced as always, floated out from the speaker. I didn't pause. I didn't flinch. I just sat down at the counter, let the steam fog my glasses, and waited for the silence to swallow her words. Help. Again. I didn't even bother deleting the message. It had been almost 4 years since I wired that $5 million. Back then, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge. COVID had hit, supply chains were crumbling, and Knox Family Organics was one bad month away from total collapse. My parents sounded desperate. Not just scared for the business desperate, but scared for our future desperate. At the time, I'd just exited my second tech startup, sold my shares, and walked away with a portfolio most people only dream of. I remember the call clearly. Dad spoke first, then passed the phone to Victor, my older brother, whose tone always made it sound like he was already doing me a favor just by calling. "It's not charity, Nadia. It's family," he said. "Once this turns around, we'll fold you in officially. You'll lead it." I didn't even hesitate. I wired the money that night. $5 million, 24 hours, no contracts, just trust. For months I told myself I had done the right thing. I was helping the people who raised me, supporting the company that had our name etched into every label. I clung to that narrative until it cracked. The first fracture came in the form of a casual email, one I wasn't meant to see. It had been forwarded by mistake from the accountant to my old work address. I nearly skipped over it, but something in the subject line caught my eye. Q2 adjustments, CEO loan breakdown. Curious, I opened it. Then I stopped breathing. The document listed a series of large withdrawals dated shortly after my transfer. The description read, "Loan to CEO for operational support." At first, I assumed CEO meant general expenses, maybe payroll, vendor payments, renovations. But the math didn't add up. None of the amounts lined up with the outstanding invoices I'd seen earlier. The dates were precise, suspiciously aligned with payments I had personally tracked. I cross-referenced the document with the expense records from the bank I'd used to send the wire. Every line pointed to one thing. The money had been pulled and rerouted, outside the business. So, not operational expenses, not survival, just gone. And no one had said a word. I sat there blinking at the screen, heart thudding. I had to confirm it wasn't a mistake. Maybe the document was outdated. Maybe I was wrong. That naive reflex, the one trained over years of justifying their choices, kicked in again. I called Larissa. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "I came across something in the expense reports. I just need to clarify." "Oh, Nadia, please, don't start picking at old wounds." Her voice was flat, cold, like I'd brought up an inconvenience, not a betrayal. "I'm not accusing anyone," I replied. "I just want to understand where—" "You gave what you gave," she snapped. "Let's not go backward. We've all moved on." And with that, she hung up. Victor didn't even return my message. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with only the stove light on, staring into the stillness of my own silence. I thought about every family dinner where I picked up the tab, every emergency check I'd written, every call that began with "just this once." I had kept that company afloat. Me. Not Victor. Not Larissa. Not the legacy of Knox Family Organics, just me and my wire transfer. It wasn't mismanagement. It was strategy. They took what they needed and erased the trail, like I'd never existed. And what made it worse wasn't the money. It was the clarity. The realization that love in my family was never unconditional. It came with ledgers, expectations, unspoken rules that said, Give everything, ask for nothing, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be allowed to stay. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd used for strategy sessions back in my startup days. I flipped past pages of notes and diagrams until I found a clean sheet. Then, with a black ink pen, I wrote, $5 million bought their survival and cost me my place. I stared at it, not for drama, not for anger, but because it was true. And truth, once written, demands a response. I didn't know what I would do next, not yet. But I knew one thing. I was done pretending this was about misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion, it was a decision, and they had made it without me. I didn't sleep, not really. I laid there on the couch, tea long gone cold, laptop open beside me, its soft light casting a pale rectangle across the hardwood floor. Denver's night was quiet outside my window, but inside my chest, chaos. Just before dawn, I sat back up and reopened the spreadsheet. There it was, same numbers, same dates. I highlighted the transactions one by one, my transfer, then their withdrawals, the silence in between. I whispered, barely audible even to myself. I saved them, and now I'm the ghost? It wasn't just theft. It was the way they'd moved on, as if I was never part of the rescue, like I'd never been there at all. I closed the file and reached for a box I hadn't touched in months, the one buried under old tax folders. Inside, printed press clippings, board documents, and a yellowing flyer from the Knox Family Organics 2022 Revival Showcase. That was the year they'd made it back. I hadn't been invited, but I had watched, alone from my apartment, on a glitchy live stream that kept buffering. I remembered it clearly. Levon standing tall on stage, my parents on either side, the Knox logo glowing behind them. He smiled like a politician, one hand raised in gratitude, the other gripping the microphone. It wasn't luck, he said with that rehearsed grin. It was creativity, risk, belief. We didn't give up, even when others doubted us. That's how you save a legacy. I waited for it, my name, my story. Even a thank you buried in some bland corporate sentence. But nothing came. Not once, not a syllable. He took the credit. They all did, and the crowd clapped like they'd witnessed a miracle. I shut the laptop harder than I meant to. The sound cracked the silence like a whip. Of course they hadn't mentioned me. Later that same week, I got a message from Quinn, one of our old coworkers, who had quietly left during the restructuring. She sent me a string of Instagram stories, champagne toasts, a vineyard in Sonoma, fireworks bursting behind the company logo projected onto a massive white tent, a private celebration, nearly 6 figures in expenses. Quinn added one line, "Payroll was late again that month, BTW." I didn't answer. What was there to say? It wasn't even the money anymore. It was the performance, the glitz, the audacity. How do you throw a party with money you begged for, then erase the one person who made it possible? The pictures burned in my mind. Victor toasting with some VC I never met, Larissa grinning beside a cake shaped like our original store, and Levon clutching the mic like he was Moses coming down the damn mountain. I felt sick. Back at my desk, I opened my journal, flipped past the page where I wrote about the $5 million. On a new line, I scribbled, "Maybe they just didn't know how to say thank you." Then paused. No, that wasn't right. This wasn't about politeness. This was about erasure. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd decided I didn't belong in their version of the story. I was inconvenient. A reminder of their dependence, of what they owed, and people like them, people who smile in press photos while knives still drip behind their backs. They don't like reminders. They built a stage, then cut me out of the light. Later that night, as the apartment dimmed into dusk, I pulled out an old photo album I'd brought with me when I left the family house. It smelled faintly of dust and lavender, probably from being buried in the bottom of a moving box. I flipped through pages slowly. Family barbecues, business launches, holiday events. In every photo, Levon stood front and center, his arm around our dad, a grin wide across his face. And me? I was always in the background, holding someone's plate, straightening chairs, carrying files, the quiet one, the helper, invisible. One photo stopped me cold. It was from 2011. Our first investor dinner. I had built the slide deck, scheduled the venue, even rehearsed Levon's speech with him. And in the photo, I was behind the camera. They didn't even think to include me. I stared at that page for a long time before whispering, "You were always the story. I was just the support beam." I closed the album, not gently. Then I turned on my laptop again, fingers hovering over the keys. I opened a new email. To Victor Knox. Subject, "We need to talk." I started typing, paragraph after paragraph, about the loan, the party, the photos, the silence. Then I stopped. I stared at the blinking cursor for almost a full minute, then closed the window. I wasn't ready to send it. Not yet. But they'd feel me coming. I didn't touch my laptop for the rest of the night. But I didn't sleep either. The cursor still blinked in my mind long after I closed the lid, like it was waiting for me to finish what I'd started. I tried distracting myself, washed a few dishes, folded laundry that had been sitting in a basket for 2 days, but every motion felt mechanical. By the time morning filtered through the blinds, I was already back at my desk. This time, I wasn't checking emails. I went straight for the hard drive. A year ago, before they shut me out completely, I'd backed up a few internal dashboards out of habit, part of a system I used when I was still helping with investor reports. I hadn't looked at them since. Now, I opened them one by one. "If they think I'm gone," I muttered, "they'll get sloppy." The tone in my voice surprised even me. It wasn't bitter, it was clinical, like I was examining something dead under glass. I pulled up the legal registry website and typed in Knox Family Organics LLC. No result. My stomach tightened. I tried Knox Family Holdings. Still nothing. Then I searched Tate Naturals. There it was. Same business ID number, same tax structure, same executive names, but filed under a new brand. And the filing date? Exactly 1 month after I wired the last installment, $750,000. There had been no shareholder vote, no meeting, no notification, and my equity? Still listed. But under a new term, non-voting interest. They'd renamed the entire company and scrubbed me out in the same move, and they did it legally. I sat back cold all over. So this was the play. Let me fund the rescue, wait until I was quiet enough, then bury my name while polishing their own. I wasn't just forgotten. I was systematically removed, sanitized from their story like I'd never existed. I opened another file. Archived reports from early 2023. Sales figures, P&L breakdowns, projected growth slides. Then I opened the investor deck they'd used in Q2. It had been shared with over 30 stakeholders. I aligned the two documents side by side. Page 1, net revenue inflated by 27%. Page 3, customer churn described as organic attrition, when the internal report clearly cited delivery delays, contamination concerns. Page 5, Levon's quote, "Our revival wasn't funded, it was forged." Forged? I highlighted the line, then started a new folder on my desktop. Proof. I dropped screenshots in, one after another. My fingers didn't shake. My pulse didn't spike. This wasn't panic anymore. It was focus. They didn't just minimize my contribution, they rewrote the narrative. A few days later, I called Marcy. She'd been in logistics, working under me for 2 years before she was moved off-site and then quietly laid off. We hadn't spoken since the winter before the rebrand. "Hey, Nadia," she answered, cautious but warm. "Didn't expect to hear from you." We exchanged a few surface-level updates. Denver's weather, how quiet things felt post-pandemic. And then I asked, straight out, "Why did they cut your department?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Efficiency officially. But it happened 2 weeks after we flagged some inconsistencies in inventory logs. We were told to drop it. We didn't." "How many people?" 7 of us. "And the ones who stayed?" "They signed new NDAs, stricter ones." I didn't respond right away. Marcy sighed. It felt like they wanted silence, not solutions. I thanked her, hung up, then added another folder to proof, labeled it Witnesses. I wasn't gathering evidence for court, at least not yet. This wasn't about suing them. It was about seeing clearly. I'd spent most of my life telling myself they just misunderstood me, that they weren't good with words, that maybe I was too sensitive, too ambitious, too something. But the truth? They were exact in what they erased. Precise, professional. And now, I needed to be the same. I made coffee and sat at the window while it brewed. Across the street, a man walked his golden retriever. 2 kids zipped by on scooters. Normal things. Real life. The kind of life I had paused for years, waiting to be welcomed back into something that never wanted me whole. They didn't just take the company. I think they planned this from the beginning. The sun had barely broken over the rooftops of Denver when I drafted the email. It wasn't long. No accusations. No emotion. Just a single line and a subject. Subject, shareholder status inquiry. Body, am I still considered a shareholder? I hit send and waited. Mid-morning turned to early afternoon. I worked on other things, clearing out old receipts, making notes in my journal, even watering the plants I usually ignored. But the silence from Victor was loud. Too loud. Around 3 o'clock, I tried to log into the company's shareholder portal. Access denied. I refreshed the page. Still denied. I entered the credentials again, double-checked them. Same result. I stared at the rejection message blinking back at me like a dare. Account not recognized. I pulled up the Knox family email client and typed in my old credentials there too. This time it didn't just block me. It redirected to a user does not exist error. Every archived message, every shared folder, every login trail, wiped clean. It was surgical. A year ago I had access to every department folder. Logistics, R&D, PR, even compliance. Today, it was as if I'd never been on the payroll, never sat through 12-hour board meetings, never saved their crumbling house of cards with my own capital. I called Larissa. It went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I opened the company's public-facing team page. My name was gone, completely scrubbed. Even in the former contributors section, I was missing. They didn't lock the door. They burned down the entrance. For a moment, I just sat there, not thinking, not feeling, just blank. Then, slowly, the fog lifted, and all that remained was anger, sharp, precise, clean. My phone buzzed that evening, an unlisted number. I hesitated before answering. A voice came through, hurried and hushed. It's Melanie. Don't say my name out loud. Melanie had been my assistant 2 years ago, thoughtful, loyal. She left around the time things started to shift behind the scenes. I shouldn't be calling you, but you need to know, she said. They're telling people you've been unstable, that you've sent threatening messages. They're using the report you filed last year as proof. I felt my jaw tighten. You mean the one outlining the misuse of capital during Q3? I asked. Yes, she said. They're twisting it, saying you lashed out emotionally, that they had to remove you for safety reasons. For whose safety? I asked bitterly. They're framing you as unpredictable, a liability. Even the new hires are told not to reach out if you contact them, like you're radioactive. I closed my eyes, listening to the betrayal stack itself into a tower of rot. They told one guy you tried to leverage your past help for control, like you were some power-hungry ghost haunting the brand. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. They were turning the truth into poison, one drop at a time. I shouldn't say more, Melanie added. I used a VPN just to call you. You did the right thing, I said. Thank you. The call ended. I stared at my reflection in the blank screen of my laptop. They hadn't just pushed me out. They'd painted me as the threat. That night, as city lights began to flicker outside, Victor finally called. The number lit up and my stomach curled, but I picked up. His voice was calm, too calm. Nadia, I sent you an email, I said. I saw it. And? You made yourself a liability. I kept the lights on when no one else could, I said, the words low and steady. And now I'm the problem? There were concerns, he replied. You were acting erratically. Our advisors agreed it was best to create distance. I laughed once, bitter and breathless. You didn't create distance, you detonated it. We had no choice. Then he hung up, just like that. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, barely hearing the kettle begin to whistle behind me. For a second, I didn't move. Then I turned off the stove, poured water into the mug, and sat down. Slowly, like my body weighed more than usual. I reopened my old message to the board, the one Victor referenced. It was professional, factual, 2 pages of charts, flagged transactions, Inconsistencies in payroll dates. No threats, no emotion, just truth. And somehow, that truth made me a villain. I grabbed my pen and wrote in my journal. They silenced me not because I was wrong, but because I was right. I stared at the sentence for a long time, then circled it. They wanted war? They picked the wrong woman. I didn't sleep, I didn't pace, I didn't cry. Instead, I deleted the folder labeled Bored Emails from my drive. A folder I had once curated with hope, hoping dialogue might be enough, that data and dignity would convince them to do the right thing. Then I opened a new one. I named it Reckoning. This wasn't about fairness anymore. It was about exposure, about accountability, about truth, even if it scorched the earth. By morning, a message popped into my inbox. The sender's name was unfamiliar, Ellie Owl 88. No subject, no text, just a single audio attachment with one line. You need to hear this. I hesitated, scanned the file, checked the metadata. It had been recorded 3 days ago inside the company offices. I clicked play, a crackle of background noise. Then my mother's voice, crisp and chillingly calm. If she wants to be dramatic, let her. Just make sure she's nowhere near press or staff. We need this to stay clean. Clean, like I was filth, like I was contamination control. The call ended with murmurs of agreement, polite chuckles. One voice added, "We'll keep her name off everything moving forward." I replayed it twice, then a third time slower. My mother wasn't just ignoring me, she was instructing others to erase me. The same woman who once pulled me out of swim class early so I wouldn't get tired before finals was now treating me like a stain to scrub out of their perfect picture. I saved the file, encrypted it, and labeled it mothersorders.mp3. Before I could even process the ache forming behind my ribs, another ping lit up my screen. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from Darren, a quiet engineer who had worked with me for years. Attached were screenshots from the company's internal Slack channels, messages between Levon and several senior team members. Levon: "She's off the rails." Manager A: "Do we need to be worried?" Levon: "She's not a threat, just obsessed with herself. Classic narcissist meltdown." Intern: "She sent me a weird email last year, totally unhinged." Levon: "You should have seen her during that audit. Paranoid as hell." I scrolled further, numb but strangely focused. A recent LinkedIn post praised Levon for transforming a family crisis into a generational win. Hundreds of likes. Comments flooded in. One that caught my eye. "Jealous little sister syndrome. It's always the quiet ones who implode." I stared at it, and stared, until my eyes burned. Then I shut the laptop, walked to the kitchen, and knocked over my coffee mug by accident. The liquid spread across the table, fast, chaotic, unforgiving, like everything else lately. I grabbed a towel and started blotting aggressively. I wasn't imploding. I was done being polite. I dialed Victor. He picked up on the third ring. No preamble, just my name, Nadia, like it tasted bitter coming out of his mouth. "I know about the payout to Melanie," I said. "I know about the gag order, and I know you used company funds to shut her up." He didn't deny it. "It was complicated," he said, voice tired. "We did what we had to avoid more damage." "To whom?" I asked. "The truth doesn't damage things that deserve to survive." Victor exhaled heavily. "It wasn't personal." "Then why did you make it a family business if loyalty was optional?" I shot back. "Why take my money, use my silence, then turn me into the villain?" Another pause. "Don't make this messier than it already is." "I didn't make the mess," I said. "I just stopped cleaning it up." Then I hung up. I sat for a moment, staring at the call log. My hand shook, but not from fear, from clarity. I opened a new Word document and titled it, "Statement to Investors, Draft." Every word was careful, intentional. I listed timelines, transaction trails, misappropriated budgets. I cited employee gag orders, falsified marketing claims, whistleblower retaliation. No adjectives, just facts. When I was finished, I didn't hit send. Instead, I printed the draft and folded it. I placed it beside my bed, under the lamp, where I would see it every night before sleeping. That was my new alarm clock. Because I knew now there was no room for more warnings. They had shown me who they were. They didn't just lie. They paid to keep others from telling the truth, and that's where I draw the line. I had just started boiling water for tea when the ping hit my inbox. It wasn't dramatic, no red warning, no urgent subject line screaming at me, just one quiet, cold email with the subject, Final Clarification, Legal Notice. It was from Larissa's personal attorney. I opened it. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I was beyond those reactions now. What I read was deliberate, sterile, and absolute. Per Section 12 of the Family Business Contract, Nadia Knox is no longer recognized as a stakeholder or kin in financial matters, effective immediately. One sentence. That's all it took to cut me out. Not just from the company, but from the family ledger. It was a legal exorcism. No emotion, just terms and clauses. I let the kettle keep whistling. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my living room, surrounded by receipts, login tokens, and old statements. I pulled out my backup drive and opened what I had labeled months ago as Shadow Archive. It didn't take long. Among the remnants of my old admin credentials, I found traces. Just enough to follow a thread. A withdrawal from the company account tagged Temporary Assistance. Date, 2 years ago. Amount, $48,000. Origin, Larissa's personal routing number. It was the same amount I had wired for inventory restructuring. I pulled up the old email exchange. We're stuck with unsellable stock. Can you cover it for now? I'll return it before Q3. That's what she'd said. There was no inventory, no restructuring, just an overdue payment on her private line of credit. It was personal debt, dressed up in a business memo, no record of repayment, no acknowledgement, no shame. I leaned back against the couch and exhaled, the air catching in my throat. Betrayal didn't come with fire anymore. It came with stillness. Then came Victor. I dug deeper. A $200,000 line of credit opened under the company's name. I cross-referenced it with 3 flagged transactions marked as employee expense corrections, except they weren't connected to any employee I knew. A few calls later, I confirmed it through the bank's legal department. The line had been used to cover Victor's legal consultation during a personal business lawsuit and his back surgery. The funds were pulled from an account that had once been seeded by me, $5 million strong. This wasn't mismanagement, I whispered aloud. This was theft. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't trying to take back what was already lost. But I wasn't about to let them keep using my name to clean their messes. I made an appointment with someone I trusted, Kira, an attorney I'd worked with during my early investor days. She greeted me at her downtown Denver office, offered coffee, and sat without judgment as I laid it all out. I'm not here to sue, I told her. She tilted her head. Then what do you want? I want a firewall. I want them legally banned from using my name, my money, or any ties to my brand or history in future dealings. If they claim I was involved, there needs to be a record showing I wasn't. Kira's eyes narrowed. You understand what that implies? It implies I'm done letting them rewrite the script. She nodded. It also implies they're going to retaliate. They already did, I said. This isn't a fire I started, I just stopped putting it out. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table and drafted the letter. To the Board of Directors. Subject: Official notification of financial breach and severance of representation. I laid out everything, chronologically, cleanly. I attached scanned screenshots of statements, timelines of unauthorized activity, even quotes from NDA-protected conversations I now knew had been weaponized. I didn't accuse. I documented. At the bottom I wrote, if your silence continues, legal transparency begins. I didn't send it yet. I printed it, folded it twice, slid it into an envelope I'd already addressed. I'd drop it at the post office in the morning, certified. Let them scramble. Let them prepare whatever rebuttal or denial they needed. Because this time, I had the receipts. And if they wanted war, they just got it. On record, in writing, and backed by every ounce of truth they tried to bury. Morning came fast. The envelope was still sitting where I'd left it the night before, on the edge of the counter, next to the toaster. I had barely touched my coffee when my phone buzzed. A message from Elliot Green. Subject: You need to see this before it's deleted. My thumb hovered for half a second before tapping. Attached. A PDF. Clean, neatly formatted. I recognized the email headers immediately. It was internal, a full thread. At the top, from Larissa to their family lawyer. What we need is a clean legal strategy to push Nadia out. No signature needed. She's an emotional risk. No confrontation, just resolution. The timestamp? 2 days after I wired my last $500,000. My heart didn't race. It didn't have to. The rage was slow and familiar now. No longer heat, just clarity. They weren't scrambling to protect the business. They were planning a quiet coup, and I had funded it. The rest of the email laid out everything: how they'd rewrite the bylaws to exclude me from all votes, reclassify my shares as non-assertive capital, and ensure I held no legal claim to managerial input. Larissa had even ended the email with, "Let her scream, we'll say she's just not well." That line sat in my chest like lead. I stood up, poured my coffee into the sink, took a long breath. Then, as if summoned by the storm itself, my phone rang again. Victor. I should have let it go to voicemail, but I didn't. "Hello?" His voice came through with practiced softness. "Nadia, I know things have gotten complicated, but just say it." A pause, then, "Your mother's not well. Supplier payments are behind. We need one more bridge, just until Q1, then we're clear." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You erased me from the books. Now you want me to write another check?" "It's not like that," he said, lowering his tone. "Family is still family." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "No, you don't get to use that word anymore. Not after burying me in fine print." He didn't answer. I ended the call without saying goodbye. A few hours later, I opened my blog's admin inbox, something I hadn't checked in days. There it was, a forward from a reader. "Thought you'd want to see this." Attached was a screenshot from Reddit, a thread titled, "The Real Story Behind the Knox Split." The poster claimed I was fired for embezzlement, said I'd emotionally blackmailed staff and manipulated figures. Another comment from a burner account. Her brother Levon saved the business after she cracked under pressure. I scrolled down. One username stood out. It linked back to a former PR intern. Someone who had once told me, wide-eyed, that I inspired her. They were turning the narrative. This wasn't just strategy anymore. It was character assassination. I saved every screenshot, labeled the folder, Defamation Suite Prep, because I wasn't just fighting for my name, I was building a shield they'd never get past again. That night I sat in silence for a long time. No music, no TV, just the city outside, breathing heavy in autumn wind. I curled my knees to my chest and let the grief pass through me, just once. A single wave. Not because I was breaking, but because I refused to carry this with numbness anymore. Then I got up. I walked to my desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, took out the official shareholder transfer agreement, the one they never expected me to sign. The final page was blank. I took my pen. October 11th, 2024. I signed, not because they deserved closure, but because I did. They had their chance to keep me close. Now they'll have to watch from far away, permanently. The next morning, I woke to the soft hum of my coffee pot and sunlight leaking through the blinds. There was no dread, just a sense of finality. The signed agreement sat in my bag, sandwiched between two folders. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat, walked to the nearest FedEx location, and handed the envelope to the clerk. "Certified, signature required," I said. "Recipient?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Women Forward Foundation, ATN Amy Tran." She keyed it in, and I paid without a second glance. When I stepped outside, the air hit different, lighter. It was done. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop and sent a single message to Amy. Do more with this than I ever could. I attached the formal share transfer confirmation. She was now the sole beneficiary of what used to be my stake, what used to be my legacy. The company I saved no longer had my name attached to it. Not legally, not emotionally, not even in memory. A few hours passed. Then came the retaliation. An internal email from the board somehow made its way to my inbox. Leaked, no doubt, by someone who still had a spine. Larissa had authored it. Nadia made her own choices. We didn't abandon her. She abandoned us, at the company's weakest moment. Victor took it further. I saw a message he'd sent privately to a select investor group. Knox Family Organics collapsed structurally when one key party chose exit over resolve. The narrative was flipped. Neatly, I was now the one who walked away. The one who turned her back on family values. By the following morning, 3 of my old contacts had stopped replying to my messages. A journalist I'd worked with before ghosted me on a scheduled call. They weren't just rewriting the ending, they were trying to erase the whole book. I opened a draft post. Title: The Truth Behind the $5 Million Rescue. I pulled in screenshots, dated emails, bank receipts, shareholder terms. It was watertight. Then I stared at the publish button. It hovered there, blinking like it was daring me. But after a moment, I closed the tab. I didn't owe the world my pain just to validate my version of the truth. Instead, I opened a different document, one I hadn't touched in over a year. It was a letter I had started writing to myself on my 30th birthday. A letter to my younger self. That same version of me who thought success would make her safe. That loyalty guaranteed love. I wrote 2 more paragraphs, then signed it, "Love me, now," and saved it. That afternoon, I walked to a park I hadn't visited in years. It was still the same: gravel paths, fading benches, and a mural of butterflies painted near the playground. I used to come here when I was a teenager, headphones on, notebook in hand, dreaming about the kind of future I wanted to build. Now I had lived it, and lost it, and built something better. I sat on the bench and let myself exhale fully for the first time in weeks. No more checking behind me, no more waiting for an apology that would never come, just silence and peace. I pulled out one final envelope from my bag, this one addressed to the legal team at Knox Family Organics. A cease and desist, short, sharp. Cease defamation activity or legal action proceeds. I dropped it into the outgoing box at the postal kiosk near the park gate. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like maintenance, like closing a file folder so I could clear space. That evening, Amy called. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't need to. "I just wanted to let you know," she said. "We've already launched a microgrant program with your transfer. 5 women-led businesses have received funding, one of them starting a food co-op, another, a mobile therapy van for underserved neighborhoods." I didn't cry. I just smiled, real, small, and solid. "You didn't just leave something behind," Amy said. "You built a way forward." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you, Amy," I said. Truly. After the call, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll through social media. I sat in the dark with a cup of tea and thought about what it means to walk away before a place burns you from the inside out. They took my silence as surrender, but I wasn't silent. I was healing. The kettle whistled softly in the background as I checked my inbox, expecting the usual foundation updates or a note from Amy. But what caught my eye wasn't from anyone I knew. Subject: When Founders Are Forgotten, the hidden story of Knox Organics. It was an industry blog, mid-tier, independent, the kind of site execs snubbed, but insiders read religiously. I wasn't the source. But someone, somewhere, had seen enough. The article pulled no punches. It tracked the early rise of the company, the sudden silence around its real investor, and linked the timeline with shareholder data, still public if you knew where to look. The final paragraph posed a question. What happens when those who build the house are written out of the address? It spread fast. No dramatic headlines, no explosive lawsuits, just quiet accountability that moved through back channels like cold air under a door. A few days later, news slipped out that Larissa had been quietly removed as CEO after a late-night board vote. No press conference, no handoff ceremony, just a short notice in a shareholder bulletin. Executive transition, effective immediately. Victor issued a vague apology via an internal memo, something about misalignment of vision and regret for misunderstandings. I didn't bother reading it all. And Lavon? His social pages went dark. A whispered harassment suit surfaced, connected to an event 2 years ago. No one seemed surprised. They just nodded, like it all made sense now. There were no fireworks, no crowd-pleasing collapse, just erasure, the same way they'd tried to erase me. 2 weeks later, I received a letter, handwritten, slanted script, no return address. Dear Nadia, I know we haven't spoken since the day I walked out of the logistics office. I didn't have the courage then. But when I heard you refuse to be quiet, when I saw someone stand up, even with everything to lose, I realized maybe I could speak too. You made it easier for people like me to say what's true. Thank you for not staying quiet. Melanie. I read it twice, then placed it inside a small wooden box I kept beneath my bed, labeled, kept, not forgotten. That afternoon, I stood before a small crowd of women at a community center, hosted by Amy's Foundation. The room was nothing flashy, folding chairs, mismatched mugs of coffee, but the energy inside? Real. I didn't read from a script. I didn't name names or mention dollar amounts. I simply said, power isn't in what they take from you, it's in what you choose never to give again. They clapped, not wildly, not like I delivered some great victory speech, but steady, respectful. Some even stood. And I didn't flinch. Later that week, I visited the new co-working space our foundation had helped fund, an open, sunlit office for women starting their first ventures. I wasn't on the board. I didn't run it. I just came to listen, mentor, and, once in a while, laugh again. One young founder, maybe 25, looked up at me after a brainstorming session. "What happened to your family?" she asked, hesitant. I paused. There was so much I could say, pages worth. But I simply replied, "They taught me how to walk away with grace." And I smiled. Not because I was over it, but because I was moving forward anyway. I didn't need a parade. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me I'd won. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about no longer needing to. They closed their doors on me, but I opened mine and walked through. I used to think walking away meant failure, that letting go meant weakness. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop proving your worth to people who benefit from your silence. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Your peace is worth more than their approval. Your value isn't up for negotiation, especially not with those who only remember you when they need saving. Maybe you've been the one who gave too much, stayed too long, or tried too hard to be accepted by the people who should have protected you first. If that's you, please hear me when I say, you are allowed to choose yourself. You don't owe anyone your breakdown to earn your breakthrough. So now, I want to ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to protect who you are? Or maybe you're still standing at that edge, wondering if you can take that first step. If this story touched something deep in you, drop a 1 in the comments so I know I'm not alone. Or let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too. And hey, if this kind of storytelling speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next. Real stories, real emotion, real people, just like you. You deserve healing, you deserve honesty, and most of all, you deserve to be heard.